We have a massive stack of notes today, and I mean massive. We are diving into a 3-hour marathon conversation from the Joe Rogan Experience.
Oh, yeah.
Episode #2442. His guest was Ehsan Ahmad, a comedian, a regular at the Mothership Club in Austin. And, usually when we cover a comedian, you expect the takeaways to be, well, jokes.
Right, or maybe some inside baseball about the industry.
Exactly.
But this was different. I mean, yes, they talk about comedy, but the conversation felt like a fever dream that just happened to be recorded.
Yeah.
It just oscillates wildly.
Yeah.
1 minute they're dissecting the, high school dynamics of the Austin comedy scene, and the next they're deep in the weeds on immigration data, government audits.
Yeah.
And then just with no warning.
A hard left turn.
A hard left into cryptozoology and lost languages.
Yeah.
It's all over the place.
It is exactly the kind of conversation that makes you feel like you're sitting around a campfire at like 2 a.m. It's chaotic.
Yeah.
But our mission today is to extract the signal from that noise. Because underneath that sprawling late night vibe, they actually hit on some incredibly specific data points, stuff about border policy, cancel culture, and some truly bizarre historical anomalies that make you question how much of our reality is actually real.
And that's really the core theme we're going to explore today, the idea of the walled garden.
The walled garden.
Yeah, whether that's a comedy club or a political narrative or even the history books themselves. We build these walls around what we think is true, and sometimes we totally ignore the monsters or, the miracles that are right outside the gate.
Okay, let's unpack this. Let's start with the literal walled garden they talked about, the Austin comedy scene.
Right.
Rogan and Ahmad spend, the first hour painting this picture of the Mothership, that's Rogan's club, as this, perfect meritocracy.
A utopia, basically.
Yeah, they describe it as a place where the rising tide lifts all boats. They bring up guys like Hans Kim and Com Patterson, who went from doing open mics to, launching massive careers.
Getting on Saturday Night Live, all because the environment was just so supportive. From the inside, it looks perfect. Pure joke writing, iron sharpening iron. But here's where it gets fascinating. Rogan brings up a conversation he had with a philosopher friend. And this friend told him, point blank, you haven't built a community, you've built a walled garden.
Oof, that is such a sticky image. Because a garden is nice, but a wall implies exclusion.
Exactly. And that exclusion has consequences. Rogan's friend argued that while everyone inside the garden is having a great time supporting each other, the people on the outside feel left out.
And that exclusion creates jealousy.
It creates jealousy. And jealousy fuels narratives. So Rogan admits that because he and some of his friends have these, loose connections to Trump or other conservative figures, the narrative outside the wall it morphs.
It becomes, oh, that's a right-wing space, or that's a racist space.
Yeah. It's just easier to label the whole garden as evil than to admit you just aren't invited to the party.
And that leads directly to the Michael Rappaport incident they broke down.
It does. And this wasn't just celebrity gossip. It was a really interesting case study in how these digital narratives can impact, physical businesses.
So, for context, Michael Rappaport, he's this loud, brash New Yorker. I don't think anyone would ever call him a right-wing darling, historically.
Great call.
But he had shows canceled at Cap City Comedy and other venues, and it wasn't because of ticket sales.
No. It was driven by a group called the Austin for Palestine Coalition. They labeled him a racist provocateur. And a hate monger.
And the specific accusation was that he mocks dead civilians and children.
Right. And Rogan and Ahmad really pushed back on that. They were kind of analyzing it in real time. And they both said, look, the guy is loud. We get that. But we haven't seen any evidence of him mocking dead children.
But the truth of the accusation almost didn't matter.
That's the takeaway right there. It highlights the asymmetry of passion in the digital age. You have this organized online campaign that can exert massive pressure on a physical venue. The club management might not even agree with the protesters, but the friction, the emails, the staff feeling uncomfortable, the potential for a scene outside the door.
It just becomes a liability.
It's a liability. So the business choice is just to cancel the show. It's like a heckler's veto, but on a corporate scale.
It creates this total disconnect between reality and the consequences. You could be punished for a narrative, regardless of the facts.
Exactly. And speaking of facts, that brings us to the political deep dive they did. Because if the comedy scene was about social narratives, this next part was all about the raw data.
This was the densest part of the show, for sure. They actually pulled up Perplexity AI, which is like a research engine, to fact-check immigration data live on air.
Yeah, they really wanted to know what is the truth about who is crossing the border.
And they found a number that was it's a perfect Rorschach test for the entire immigration debate, 8%.
8%.
Okay, walk us through the math here.
So they were looking at data from roughly 11 million interactions with illegal immigrants over a 4-year period.
11 million.
Yeah. And the data suggested that about 5 to 8% of the individuals in ICE detention have convictions for violent crimes or, serious property damage.
And this is where the interpretation gets so tricky, because you can look at that number and see two completely different realities.
Exactly. On one hand, you look at 8% and you say, okay, that implies the vast majority, 92%, are just regular people.
Yeah.
Rogan even painted this really sympathetic picture of someone who sees the optics of an open border, and they just come looking for work.
And then they get hunted by men in bulletproof vests.
Right. So to that 92%, the enforcement looks like this insane overkill. But then you flip the coin.
You flip the coin to the law of large numbers.
And when you're dealing with a population of 11 million people, 8% is not a small number.
Not at all.
Rogan called it a giant number of potential monsters. I mean, we're talking about hundreds of thousands of people with serious criminal records entering the system.
It really just highlights the duality of the situation. You can be compassionate toward the millions who want a job.
And at the same time, be terrified of the, 80,000 who might want to hurt you. They also contrasted the optics of ICE itself. They brought up an anecdote about an ICE agent who was dragged 300 feet by a car.
Just highlighting the extreme danger of the job.
Versus the terrible optics of a viral video where ICE shoots a lady. It goes right back to that walled garden idea. If you're inside the garden, you see the danger the agents face. If you're outside scrolling Twitter, you just see the insane video of the shooting.
We're looking at the same world, but seeing two different movies.
Exactly.
And speaking of different movies, let's talk about California, because Rogan and Ahmad went hard on Governor Gavin Newsom. And this wasn't just general, California's expensive talk. They zeroed in on a very specific financial mystery.
The missing billions.
Yeah.
They discussed how the state of California spent roughly $24 billion on homelessness.
$24 billion.
And yet, if you walk around San Francisco or LA, the results are invisible. I mean, in fact, it often looks worse.
So naturally, people wanted to know where the money went. The State Assembly and the Senate passed bipartisan bills to audit the spending, and the vote count was just staggering.
It was unanimous.
Completely.
72-0 in the Assembly, 40-0 in the Senate. Republicans and Democrats agreed on this.
We need to see the receipts.
And then Newsom vetoed it.
He just blocked the audit, 72-0, and he just said, nope.
Now, most people would look at that and just scream, corruption. But Rogan, he analyzed it differently. He called it good gameplay.
Good gameplay. That sounds incredibly cynical.
It is, but it's also a very astute political analysis. If you view Newsom not as a governor trying to fix a state, but as a politician with presidential aspirations.
Which they are convinced he has.
Right. Then the audit is a trap.
Because if the audit happens, it inevitably exposes failure.
Exactly. It exposes fraud, waste, maybe just total incompetence. If he blocks it, he takes a temporary hit in the news cycle for the veto. Newsom blocks transparency. It blows over in a week.
But if he allows the audit?
He hands his opponents a database of failures that they can run in attack ads for the next 10 years.
So he chose the bad headline today to avoid the bad commercial tomorrow.
It's a defensive move, but it reinforces this idea that truth is something to be managed, not revealed. And that concept that truth is just a curated narrative was the perfect bridge to their discussion on history.
Yeah.
Because if a governor can hide $24 billion today, imagine what's been hidden over the last 500 years.
This segment completely blew my mind. They started talking about the fragility of human history, using the conquistadors in Mexico as the starting point.
It's just a stark reminder of how much we've lost. They noted that before the Spanish arrived, there were over 100 different languages spoken in that region.
100.
And when the conquistadors took over, they didn't just conquer territory, they effectively wiped out entire knowledge systems.
It's like formatting a hard drive. The hardware is still there, the people, the land, but the software is just gone.
Which led them to the Voynich manuscript.
Oh, I love this story. It's a mystery we still can't solve.
It's one of history's great uncrackable codes. It was rediscovered in 1912 by Wilfrid Voynich, but they carbon dated it all the way back to the 1400s.
And it's filled with these illustrations of plants and biological processes.
But here's the kicker. The plants don't exist.
Or at least we can't identify any of them.
Right, and despite all our modern tech AI supercomputers, the best cryptologists in the world, nobody can read the text. It's still completely undeciphered.
Which, sparks the debate. Is it a hoax? Is it just some guy in the 15th century trolling the future?
Or is it a record of a lost world? And that possibility, that it's a record of lost knowledge, is kind of supported by the tragedy of the Rongorongo script from Easter Island.
This one is even sadder because we know exactly why we can't read it.
Yes. The source explains that the knowledge of how to read these carved glyphs was held by a very small elite population on the island. When slavers raided, they took that specific group.
So the key to the language just died with them.
Exactly. The script is still there, carved into wood and stone, but the message is gone forever.
It just makes you realize how tenuous our grip on the past is. Rogan brought up Darius the Great, the Persian king, as the ultimate example of history is written by the victors.
It's classic propaganda. The only primary source we have for how Darius came to the throne is something called the Behistun relief. It's basically a story he carved into a rock face, way up on a cliff.
And he claims the guy he overthrew wasn't the real king, but an imposter priest.
An imposter priest named Galmada. It's basically, trust me, bro, he was a fake.
Right.
We have no other source. Darius killed the guy, carved his version of events into a mountain, and because stone lasts longer than people, his lie, if it is a lie, became historical fact.
If you carve it in rock, it becomes the truth. That is wild. And speaking of things surviving against the odds, they pivoted to nature's time capsules. Specifically, the coelacanth.
The coelacanth is just a remarkable biological anomaly. Scientists believe this fish went extinct 66, maybe 68 million years ago.
Same time as the dinosaurs.
Exactly. The science was settled. It was gone.
And then in 1938, a fisherman off the coast of South Africa just pulls one up, alive.
Not only alive, but it was already known to the locals. They called it gumbessa, or bitter fish. They had no clue it was a living fossil worth millions to science.
They just knew it tasted bad.
And that its scales were so rough, they used them as sandpaper.
That's the best detail. A scientist would frame that fish in a museum. A local is using it to sand down a canoe. It just shows how much of the natural world is still a mystery to the experts.
And our understanding of that world can change in an instant. They talked about the 1916 Jersey Shore shark attacks as a prime example of this.
Yeah, the source material points out that before 1916, people, even scientists, didn't really believe sharks were dangerous to humans.
They called them sea puppies.
Sea puppies, can you imagine?
I can't. The prevailing theory was that their jaws were too weak to break human bone. They were just harmless scavengers.
And it wasn't until this series of brutal attacks, including a bull shark swimming up a freshwater creek in New Jersey,
that the perception just completely shifted from sea puppy to monster.
It rewrote our entire relationship with the ocean. It went from a playground to a predator's territory in, 2 weeks?
It just illustrates that we are often so confident right up until the moment we are proven catastrophically wrong. Which brings us to the modern monster they talked about, artificial intelligence and the dead internet.
This is where the conversation shifted from historical dread to existential dread. They talked about a deep fake video with actors from the show Stranger Things.
And the point wasn't just, wow, cool tech. Rogan and Ahmad both admitted they couldn't tell it was fake, and they got into the legal implications of that. If AI can generate or alter footage that perfectly, surveillance video might soon be inadmissible in court.
Think about that. The old shaggy defense, "It wasn't me," actually becomes a valid legal strategy.
Your Honor, that video of me robbing the bank is a deep fake. How do you prove otherwise?
You can't. It just destabilizes the whole concept of evidence. And this feeds right into that dead internet theory. They talked about how the internet feels more and more populated by bots and just fake engagement.
Right. They use the example of the comments on Charlie Kirk's posts. Thousands of rest in piss comments that just appear to be bot behavior or just echo chamber signaling.
It creates a world where news is the only shared reality we have left.
Yes, because the algorithms have segregated our entertainment into these individual niche bubbles. You and your neighbor might watch totally different shows, listen to different music, see different memes. The only thing you have in common is the headline of the day.
And even that headline is spun differently for each of you. This digital isolation, it seems to be bleeding into real life now, especially for Gen Z. They talked about the collapse of third places.
This is a really critical sociological shift. A third place is, a spot that isn't work and isn't home.
Malls, bowling alleys.
Community centers. Those spaces are disappearing or they're becoming too expensive.
And you combine that with the high cost of living making housing unattainable, and it's leading to this collapse in community. They mention Gen Z drinks 800% less alcohol than previous generations.
Which sounds healthy, right?
Right.
On paper. But they linked it to a rise in isolation. You have these weird trends like voluntary celibacy or even virginity being sold as a brand by influencers.
Sort of brand.
A brand, yes. Because actual human connection is becoming so rare. Where you remove the physical spaces for people to meet, the malls, the bars, and you replace them with algorithms and these walled gardens.
Right.
The social fabric it starts to fray. We become spectators of life instead of participants.
That's a heavy realization. We're losing the physical connection to each other, which is why the way the end of the podcast was so poignant.
The Mr. Rogers moment.
Yes. After 3 hours of talking about monsters and corruption and bots, Ehsan Ahmad brings up this ritual he has. He watches Mr. Rogers' Emmy acceptance speech.
It's a famous clip. In the speech, Mr. Rogers asks this whole Hollywood audience, a room full of egos, to just take 10 seconds of silence.
To think of the people who loved you into being.
It's such a grounding instruction.
Yeah.
In the middle of all this chaos, the bots, the political gameplay, the lost history, it just brings it all back to the most fundamental human experience, being loved by someone. It cuts right through the noise.
It really was a journey. We started in the Wild West of internet rumors and comedy club politics, waded through the murky waters of government spending and historical erasure, and ended up with biological mysteries and a call for human connection.
It really emphasizes that we're all just trying to find our footing in a world where the ground is constantly shifting. Whether it's a fish we thought was dead for 60 million years, or a video that looks real but isn't, certainty is a luxury we just don't have anymore.
And that leads us to a final thought for you to chew on. They touch on the Epstein files in the episode, specifically how a federal judge blocked the release of files from a sex trafficking ring because the reputational harm to the powerful people involved would be too great.
And Rogan made that joke about the government using a black highlighter to redact everything.
But it's not really a joke, is it? It raises a really provocative question. If a judge today can legally block the release of files because the Johns are too powerful, and if history is only what the Darius the Greats of the world carve into rock, how much of our current reality is actually just a curated narrative?
Are we looking at the truth, or are we just reading the rock face that the victors carved for us?
That is the question. Thanks for listening to The Deep Dive. We'll catch you next time.